Good morning. So several years ago, my late husband, Jeff, and I were working with an organization, and we got a call from the leader of the organization, and he was so excited because he was telling us about this camp that he had found for families like ours, families impacted by disabilities. And he was so excited because he wanted to send our family to this camp. And he kept going on and on about all the things that they had going on there. They had zip line, and they had walking trails, and they had all these fun outdoor activities at this camp. And he could not wait to send us to this camp. Well, we were on speakerphone, and my late husband and I are sitting there, and we're looking at each other. And we're like, what are we going to do? Because we wanted to say, yes, that sounds great. This sounds fabulous. We would love to go. But we knew there was no way that would happen with our family because at the time, we have a son who requires 24/7 care. He is a homebody. He wants to stay home. He doesn't want to go out and be in nature. That's really not his thing. He has a special bed that he uses to keep him safe at night, all kinds of equipment. And plus, he overheats very easily. So we have to be careful about when we're outdoors with him as well. On top of all of that, my late husband at the time, he was a recent amputee. He had just lost his leg. We were in the middle of recovery of that, of getting healing for him, wound care, all kinds of things. I had both my son who's in a wheelchair, my husband who's in a wheelchair, and both of them need help going wherever we go. And my husband was on dialysis. So every night, for about 8 to 9 hours at night, he was hooked up to a dialysis machine. So that required so much equipment. Plus, you have to be at such a high level of cleanliness because it is literally life or death. And so just the thought of us going on this trip was so overwhelming, and it put us under so much pressure. And quite honestly, it put us in a bad spot because we felt the pressure to say yes to these people that we want to do this, but there was no way that we could make it happen. See, their heart was in the right place. They wanted to bless us. They wanted to do something special for us. That was their heart. But they made one big miscalculation, and that was they assumed that they knew what our family would like, what would be good for our family, but they didn't really know us. And so they missed the mark. And so in 2005, my late husband Jeff and I started Rising Above Ministries, and we are an outreach ministry that we focus on supporting and encouraging families living with disabilities. And we have worked with families from all around the world, and we have heard some really interesting stories over the years from families where churches have missed the mark because they made assumptions about what their family would want or what they would need because they didn't know the family. And so today I'm going to share with you some of the top assumptions that have been shared with me over the years. Now, some of these you're going to say, "No, Becky, this is ridiculous. Are you kidding me? That is a no-brainer. Nobody would do that, or nobody would say that or think that." But the reality is this happens every day. You know, I've been in disability ministry for 18 years, and I'm so encouraged when I come to these events like this because I see how far we've come from where we started all these years ago. But there's still this lack. Still there are assumptions about what our families desire, what they need. So some of these things I'm going to be sharing with you, some of these quotes are from moms that I talked to literally just a few weeks ago. So this is how recent this is. So here we go. I'm going to share with you the top 5 assumptions that families would like you to know. So hopefully you won't make these assumptions as well. Because what ends up happening a lot of times is when we make these assumptions, families get hurt. When we miss the mark, families get hurt. And that's not what we want. We want to be able to love and serve our families. So number 1. One of the biggest assumptions is don't assume where I want to serve in the church. And I would add to that also, don't assume that I can't serve in the church. You know, so often families who are impacted by disabilities, they are overseen by the church, by other people in the community. And it's often assumed that a parent wants to be the buddy for their child in church, or they want to start a special needs ministry, disability ministry. I had one mom who shared with me, she said, they asked the tired, worn-out mother to start and run the disability ministry. And that's the truth. That's what happens. They come into the parents and saying, well, here, we know that you want to start the disability ministry. And so that's one assumption, is that you want them to, the family wants, I want to go be my child's buddy in church. Well, not necessarily. The other thing is to not just assume that a parent doesn't want to serve somewhere else in the church. Another mom shared, she says, I'm not just a caregiver. They assume that I can't serve somewhere else in the church, or worse, they assume that I want to be the teacher or my child's youth leader. And she said, we need a break from each other. And so for parents of children with disabilities, we have so much to offer the church outside of the disability space. So we need to help these families know where they can serve and how they can be a part. So what can we do? Instead, so simple, have a conversation with the parent. Find out what their passions are. Find out where they want to serve. Find out where their gifts and talents lie and what they feel their calling is. And then provide opportunities for them to serve in those areas, knowing that you may have to make concessions. You may need to be flexible, because for those of you who live this life daily, things happen on a Sunday morning. Sometimes you think you're going to be able to be there on a Sunday morning, but then your child has a seizure or your child has a meltdown, whatever it is. So be flexible with them. And then also be willing to provide extra care for the child. So if a parent's wanting to serve on the worship team, but they need to be able to come practice, be willing to provide care, a place for that child to be cared for during that service, so the parent can come and serve where they feel their calling is. Or if they want to serve as a greeter, maybe to be able to be there early, we need to be able to provide additional care for them, additional care for the child. So we're not going to assume where a parent wants to serve or that they don't want to serve at all. Okay, number 2. Now again, a no-brainer. You're thinking, of course not. We know kids grow up. But don't assume that just because our children are adults that they no longer need a disability ministry. You know, my son is now 25 years old, but in many ways he's much like a toddler. And he still makes the same noises that he made, disruptions that he made when he was 3 or 4 years old. We still have them now, but they're just a little bit louder. But so we oftentimes churches will have a space for our children with disabilities, but you know what? Our kids grow up. And we need to keep that in mind and to be proactive and to be thinking ahead of what are we going to do for when the children that we serve are going to turn into adults. And so one of the moms shared with me, she said, you ostracize families and make them feel unimportant and unvalued by the church body when you prioritize missions and other outreach programs above reaching out to families living with disabilities in your own backyard. And this holds true for our friends who are adults. When we overlook our friends who are adults, then we are missing out on a whole population of amazing people who want to be a part of our church family. So instead, have a plan in place, as simple as that sounds. Be proactive for when our friends become adults. Be creative. And what's so great, there are already organizations out there who have programs and have resources. 99 Balloons has their Befriends program. They have, it's laid out for you right there so you would know what to do. Ability Ministry has a wonderful curriculum for adults living with disabilities. And so the resources are there. But be proactive, have a plan, because our kids are going to grow up. Okay, number 3. Don't assume that if as a parent comes in, if we're curt or snippy, that we're just being difficult. You know, families are going to be coming into your ministries, and they're weary and they're worn out, and they most oftentimes are having, within the school system or in other places, having to fight for everything they get for their child. And so they almost expect that when you come into church, you're going to have to fight for what you get. Also, parents come in a lot of times who have been in so much trauma from all they've gone through with their child. that there's PTSD, they have stress, they have things that are going on a daily basis. One of the moms shared with me, she says, we want to be treated normal, but we realize our circumstances are not normal. Always smile, be kind, and offer a helping hand. You never know how our day or morning has been, much less our night before. We may be coming to church exhausted, overwhelmed, discouraged, broken, etc., and giving God all we have left. We need love, tenderness, and compassion. And don't we all? That's what we all want. So what can we do instead? Instead, be mindful of what those parents might have dealt with that day, or what they deal with on a daily basis, or maybe what their night was the night before. You know, my son has sleep issues. I never know if he's going to sleep at night. I never know how much sleep I'm going to get. And if you've gone for day after day after day without sleep, it really can wear you down. So your parents are coming in stressed out, weary, exhausted, and sometimes may react in a way that if you're not careful, you can take offense to it. So learning to overlook that offense, learning to love well and overlook that offense, and just be mindful. It's hard if you don't live this life to know what it's really like for parents on a daily basis, and the stress that we feel, the anxiety that we feel, how overwhelmed this life can be. But if you can just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, like, what would their day be like? What would it be like for them? And then you can offer more grace as you go through. Okay, number 4. Don't assume we want your unsolicited advice. This is a biggie. You know, parents of kids with disabilities, I'll tell you, we are some of the best researchers that are out there. If there is something that we hear about that might have a slight chance of helping our kids, we're going to research it, and if we think it's going to help our child, we're going to try it. And so often what happens is well-meaning people come to us and they say, hey, I heard about this new treatment, or I heard about this new therapy. And it's really a way to connect with us. It's really, truly a way to want to connect with us and be kind and to kind of help us out. But oftentimes what ends up happening, it makes us feel like you think we don't know what we're doing. It's almost like a judgmental feeling, like, well, you don't think I'm doing a good enough job with my child, so you're coming to tell me what you think I need to do. And it can sometimes end up being very, very hurtful. And I had one parent who shared with me, she said, people miss the mark when they want to give me their advice on how to fix my kid. I do this every day. I'm doing the best I can for my children. When I need someone to just listen, they seem to have all the answers and want to give me their diagnosis and what I need to do about it. And that happens all the time. And again, it's not out of being malicious. It's truly out of a heart of wanting to serve. But it comes across to parents as, you don't think I know what I'm doing. So instead, what can we do? Listen. Just really listen to families. Hear their stories. You don't have to fix anything. Just be willing to listen to them. Hear their stories. Sit with them in their pain. You know, I've been through so many things with my late husband and with his illnesses, and just having someone who would be willing to honestly just sit with me. They didn't have to say a word, but they were there, present with me, so I wasn't alone. But they weren't trying to give me their counsel and what they thought I should do in a situation. And so you don't have to have anything to say. Honestly, we just need you to be our friends and to sit with us. So unless we ask, it's oftentimes better to don't assume that we want to know all the things that you may think are just what we need to hear. Okay, and last but not least, don't assume that we will be able to tell you what we need if you ask us. You know, parents of children with disabilities live with decision fatigue. We have so many decisions that we have to make all the time. I read an article from our friend Sandra here a while back, and she shared that on a daily basis, most people make about 35,000 decisions a day. But when you add in all of the things that families living with disabilities, those decisions that we have to make, and they are a lot of times, honestly, life and death decisions. And it leads to decision fatigue. Many times we don't even know what we need, especially if we are in a crisis situation. And we experienced this over and over again when my husband was sick. And people would come and they wanted to help, but they would say, well, what can we do to help you? Well, I have my husband here in the hospital bed. I have my son with profound special needs at home who is being cared for by other people. I couldn't tell you what day it was. I couldn't tell you oftentimes where we were or what we were doing. It's so stressful and so overwhelming. And so even though these people were wanting to be so kind and helpful and wanting to be a help to us, I could not even process what I needed in the moment. I needed my next breath, and that was about as far as I knew what I needed. And so our families are dealing with that day in and day out on such a high level, stress off the charts. So what can we do? We can instead take the major decision making out of the process for them. And we can do something without the family even having to really say, this is what we need. Huge one for us, DoorDash gift cards, always a win. Always a win. Because when you're in the hospital, you can use that to order food in. If you've had a long day of going to doctor's appointments, to therapy appointments, and you come home at the end of that long day, to be able to order dinner in is such a huge help. We do that as a ministry at Rising Above. When we have a family who's in the hospital, we send them a DoorDash gift card because we know that it's going to be such a help, just a simple way to help them. Offer to run errands. You know, sometimes there would just be little things I needed from the store, but I couldn't go because I had my husband and my son who both needed help, and I couldn't leave to go get what I needed. But somebody just saying, look, I'm going to the grocery store. What can I pick up for you? Was always such a huge, huge help. Coming to do things in the home to help with small repairs, another huge, huge help. And then don't forget the single parents. I've been a single parent for 6 years now. And there are things in my home that I quite frankly cannot do. And you would think, well, that's simple. But like even changing light bulbs. Well, I have high recessed lights. I'm not going to get up on a ladder when my son is there and it's just the two of us there. If I were to fall, we're in trouble. So the simple things at the home, I need help with. And so when you're looking at the families you're serving, look at those single parents, those single moms who are doing this life without that extra help and see how you can come alongside and help them. And I'll tell you, how do you avoid making assumptions? It's pretty simple. You get to know the family. You go spend time with them. You spend time in their world. You go to their home. You see what their environment is like. You see what their day-to-day looks like. You see the needs in that family, and then you are going to instinctively know what you need to do. They are not going to have to tell you. You're going to know. So with all of these scenarios, all these assumptions that we talked about, if you know the family, then you will not be making those assumptions, and those families will ultimately not end up being hurt. And that's what we want. We want to be able to slow down enough to be able to go sit with these families, to get to know them, to share the love of Jesus with them, to love them well. And that is a ministry that we can do outside of the weekly service there on the disability service every week. So, in case you're wondering, I did not go on that trip. My late husband and I did not make that trip. God saved us from that. So I was very thankful for that. But if you want to know more about Rising Above, we would love to connect with you. We have so many resources for families impacted with disabilities. You can download our app or join our church database. Just click the QR code right there. So thank you so much.